coronavirus that is troubling the world so deeply. And I dedicate it to all of the health workers of this country, all of the health workers of the region, and of the world. They are really showing what great soldiers they are. And I was so proud today to see that video of that group of 50 or 51 Cuban specialists being welcomed to Italy to help them with their problems. And Cuba really is projecting very positively in the world in this very trying time for everybody. Those of us who survive this virus, and most will, must grab the opportunity and indeed discharge the responsibility to radically change the way we live as individuals and the way we live with each other, with the rest of the world, and with Mother Nature. This is a teaching and a learning moment. We have to change. The bad and destructive habits need to be discarded, and a new consciousness, a new approach must be taken based on human value, based on respect for and harmony with Mother Nature. Up to this morning, the total number of cases worldwide were 378,041. And the total number of deaths, 16,365. That's a significant number of people. Of course, this may not be the reality of what is going on, because it only provides us with data on the number of cases detected and deaths caused by it. I would not be surprised if there are more cases around the world than the 378,000 that have been tested and are being reported. And so the death rate may be lower, actually, which would be a good thing. But 16,000 souls dying from a virus, and that's not the end of the dying, is a very troubling matter, and it must stir you to attention and reflection. What we need to do, though, is to be calm and to be careful, to be aware and to be smart. Better to keep our distance for 3 months than to expose ourselves or someone else to this virus and what it brings with it. Take walks, read, go online and read some positive things. Listen to some soothing music. Speak to your friend on the phone, or if you walk with him or her, just keep the distance. The 3-month sacrifice will be worth it, trust me, and we'll be all better off for it. We need to understand how deadly serious this thing is. And we, all of us, individuals, groups, organizations, businesses, governments alike, we need to understand how serious it is. And also to understand that if we follow precautions, all of us follow precautions, lives and a lot of anguish and suffering will be spared. Up to now, in Italy, 6,077 people have died. That's the most of any country. China, 3,277. Spain, 2,311. Iran, 1,812. France, 860. USA, 562. UK, 335. And much of what we have here imported, coronavirus, has come from the UK. Netherlands, 213. Germany, 123. South Korea, 123. Switzerland, 120. Belgium, 120. Indonesia, 49. Japan, 42. And others, spread all over the world. In St. Kitts, while we are happy to see that some businesses have been taking precautions, we hope that more will do the same. Meanwhile, we believe that there are too many people here who are not taking it seriously enough. Too many people here are not taking it seriously enough. And to them, I want to read over verse 4 of this little poem that I wrote today. And it reads like this. Those of us who are not serious enough about this, understand, I just told you about how many people have died. The cases in New York City have doubled in the last 3 days. And the health officials are saying that anybody who has been in New York over the last 2 weeks must be put in quarantine wherever they go. So the verse I want to read for you is, show love and care 6 feet away until July, even September. Practice health and hygiene every day to avoid going 6 feet under. I spoke to a young man one day last week about the COVID-19. And he told me that he's not worried because the virus does not affect young people severely. Again, when I went home this evening, what did I see on CNN? A juvenile died from it today. I engaged the young man in conversation about the health, the social, and the economic implications of this virus. And after a while, he seemed to come around to the realization that, like every single one of us, he has to take responsibility to stop and control this virus as quickly as possible. I can only hope he takes the message, that he lives the message and shares it with others. Not just talk the talk or talk the walk, but walk the walk. And so to all of you, I have this little message. Spread the message, not the virus. Get the message, not the virus. Spread the message of care and caution and proper practices. Spread the message. Do not spread the virus. And get the message. Do not get the virus. Maybe one of those creative persons can do a little jingle for that and put it on social media and help to sensitize people to the responsibility they have to themselves and to others and to the society as a whole. This thing spreads like wildfire, and if we are careful, all of us are careful, it will stop. If we don't offer it a host to come and live on and pray on, it will not come on us. It can't, and it will die out. It falls to us, I'm going to repeat, all of us, to examine and determine if in this crisis, which we all face, a crisis that will demand and drive individuals and groups and businesses and nations and the entire global community to a change of approach in life, a change of approach in business, in everything that we do. It falls on us to determine if we are prepared as we can be. Let's not say we are as prepared as we can be when we are not. Whether you are an individual or a company or the government, let's not pull punches. Let us examine to see if each of us is carrying out his or her responsibility, from the captain to the cook to the bottle washer to the sweeper. And that's what we'll be discussing tonight. Now, as you all know, the Prime Minister addressed the nation on the COVID-19 on Sunday night. And he sought to make the point that his administration was not only well positioned in the fight to stop the virus from coming in, but also well positioned to manage it if it indeed breached our defenses. In fact, he said, we are as prepared as we can be. Now, I don't know if that says much really. I don't know if that says much, but he says that we are not only well positioned to fight and stop the virus from coming in, but also well positioned to manage it if it did breach our defenses. Now, let me see if I could get to the highlights of his address. He said preparations began a while back. Now, we knew of this virus in China since December, and it became a threat, a pandemic threat, I think around the end of December, early January of this year, which means that every country should have been put on guard to examine its regime and to make sure it was ready to meet the worst. That information was available out of China from the end of December last year, early January this year. So the Prime Minister said on Sunday, preparations began a while back. He said, the government is in the process of acquiring protective equipment. Well, how long ago were the preparations begun? For him to say on Sunday night that government is in the process of acquiring protective gear, I think some might have been displayed today or will be displayed tonight on TV. So I don't know if they got some within that period of time. He said he's requested support for 85 professionals plus local retired health professionals. We heard today in his press conference that I think it is 31 technical people, respiratory specialists and specialist nurses and so are due to be coming in from Cuba. He said that an additional $16.9 million has been allocated for the health sector for COVID-19. This is in addition to the $60 or so million that was budgeted in the budget of last December for 2020. He gave a hotline number, 311. Now, I happened to call that hotline as recently as this afternoon, 10 times, and nobody answered it. I also called it yesterday, 10 times, and nobody answered it. I hope they get that organized because they say that they are ready and that they are not only ready, but they are leading the pack. They're more ready than anybody else. I wish that would be true. I don't want anybody to suffer in this country from it. So all of us are backing the government to be ready to meet whatever can come. Hopefully it won't be too bad. Hopefully we won't have any cases here at all. But who knows? He says many meetings are being held and at many levels. Well, the meetings included a number of stakeholder groups, which he mentioned today at the press conference, which I'll refer to. But I don't think there's any information to suggest or confirm that he invited the opposition, which must have something to say on the matter. Its leader is a doctor. It has another doctor in it who is also a graduate of Cuba and who has been advocating that we reach out to Cuba for quite a while. And when I come to the financial and fiscal measures that they're taking, they propose, I will refer to some other matters. He says, after saying that they're well positioned, in the same address on Sunday night, after saying they're well positioned, he said that we are working on a robust plan to prepare all. But if you're well positioned, how can you still be working on a robust plan? One would expect you would have had a robust plan if you're well positioned, and as if you said today, you are in position A, and a plan that must be dynamic and you change it to get it better, tweak it here and there. But it is difficult to make the point successfully to a discerning mind that you are in position A, you are ahead of everybody else, but you're working on a plan still. He encouraged social distancing, although they were acting in contravention of their call for social distancing by having their town halls. Now I'm told that tonight they're having a virtual town hall on ZIZ. So they've listened to their technical people who have been urging them to stop having these town halls. No visitors to the HMP, Her Majesty's prison. And that is understandable. It's a number of people concentrated in a small space. No visitors to elderly homes. That's also understandable. Borders being strengthened daily based on advice and information. Well, I would like to see the evidence of that. Although today, he indicated that the borders would be closed down, I think by tonight or tomorrow night. When I get to that, I'll deal with it. Additional immigration and customs officers being recruited. Now, if you're in an advanced stage of readiness, and you're still preparing a plan, a robust plan, and still have to be employing people, that means you're aiming to that position, which is a good thing and the right thing, but you're not quite there yet. And will these immigration and customs officers be neophytes, people who have no experience? Will they be trained? How long will it take to train them? He says on Sunday night that our measures will be based on what is right for St. Kitts Nevis at this time. There are, as far as I understand it by the World Health and PAHO and these organizations, there are international standards that must be followed. I'm not saying one size fits all, but certain standards must be followed. And he did say that St. Kitts and Nevis is the model that other countries are looking to follow, which I found a little bit surprising to hear when you contrast that with the reality on the ground and with his own comments of preparations being made. He said, non-essential travel to countries with COVID-19 is being discouraged. Now they're closing the borders, I think, tomorrow night. Port entry screening and 14-day quarantine period is in place. That's what he said on Sunday night. Well, let me tell you of a case that I know. And there are many cases. We know of the one of the person in Christchurch some weeks ago. There are cases of people who have been sent to their homes in quarantine. The chief medical officer said today that these people in quarantine are monitored on a daily basis. She said today that 292 people have been quarantined, 4 at a government facility and 288 at home, 207 in St. Kitts and 81 in Nevis. How many personnel do they have deployed to ensure that a successful daily monitoring program is in place for these persons? She says there are 4 at a government facility. We know of a case of a gentleman who came in from another island in the region where COVID-19 exists. He was put into quarantine in a government-designated quarantine location, which is a house in a residential area, that is okay, that has not been used as a house for several years. This took place on Friday. He was delivered there. Up to Saturday, nobody had come to see him, and nobody had brought anything for him to eat. We know of other cases where citizens have been told to go home into quarantine. Citizens who do not live at home alone and who are not quarantining themselves in their bedrooms. They are mingling and intermingling with family members, which exposes the risk in the event, God forbid, that the quarantined individual turns up later with symptoms and is tested positive. Then you have a whole swarm of people to bring into the net, and you have to ask that swarm of people who they contacted over the last X amount of days. And God forbid again, you see what you're seeing in New York, in the last 2 days, the number of persons testing positive has doubled in the last 2 or 3 days. Dr. Laws, who is the CMO, was asked today, and you see I'm going from the address on Sunday night to today, but I just want to finish the point. Is it being properly policed? She spoke about the statutory rules and orders to the quarantine and act dealing with quarantining under public health, which is an ancient act, which has it as an offense to break quarantine. But the offense is so ancient that the penalty was, I think, written down in pounds and shillings and pence. Now the government says that it has been ready, and it is more ready than anybody else. The government should be put on guard since the end of December last year or early January. It was only this month that they approved and passed the SRNO, changing the penalty for the offense to $8,000. They did that in this month, a matter of days ago. Now that to me is not a sign of readiness. If they were ready, this thing would have been done a month before, maybe 6 weeks before, in late January or early February. And it's a good thing that there are such caring and observant technical people working for the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, because it is the technical people who pointed out to the political directorate, who I am sure felt from time to time that some of these technical people were a little bit paranoid with the concerns they were raising to the political directorate. But were it not for that pressure by the technical people, God forbid, that provision might not even have been changed by now. And you could imagine somebody being quarantined and going to court and being fined 18 shillings and 6 pence. What I'm talking about is fact. They said all non-nationals will go through additional screening at the ports. Government is thinking about students abroad. They should follow the guidelines where they are, but they're welcomed to come home. A number of the students out there will now be stranded. The borders will close down until April 7th and then reviewed. The situation will be reviewed. My suspicion is that it's going to be very difficult to open those borders again in just over a week. My hope is that we have a quick resolution to this problem. My expectation is that this is a long-term thing. A long-term thing. And there's going to be a lot of suffering and stress and distress before it's all over. I don't want to paint a negative picture. I just want you to give the reality. And you put the positives on top of that. he said, let me see if I find any other notes. He said that met with Social Security on the day before to discuss certain things, and that came out in the press conference today. He said this pandemic is above politics. And if the information does not come from the government, you are right to question it. Suppose it comes from the government, Mr. Prime Minister. Are you not right to question it too? Especially when we are being told that the quarantine arrangement is being monitored every day and everything is in order. The CMO did say they were going to police it. The CMO or somebody else did. And I'm not directing my comments. I'm looking to get responses from the technical people. I'm not even looking for responses. I'm just making my observations. Who wants to respond can respond. If information is coming from outside of the government, what the Prime Minister likes to call mischief makers or fake news, then you have a right to question it. Well, I'm telling you, as if you don't know it already, you don't only have a right, you have a responsibility to question information regardless of the source of the information. Now, the government quarantine building in which that gentleman was sent on Friday had not been inhabited for quite a while, I told you that. But what I didn't tell you was it was also infested with cockroaches and had some rats living in there. So the man is from foreign, comes into this place, almost abandoned, no food for nearly 24 hours, surrounded by cockroaches and the occasional rat. You can't say you are leading the pack if your quarantine facilities, I hope that has been cleaned up and sorted out, but that was the case last weekend. You cannot say you are in front of the line when you're offering facilities like that to people. These are human beings, and it does not reflect well on us. I want to take a little break, and when I come back, Quint, I want to deal with the fiscal measures that the Prime Minister referred to, and maybe some other comments by other members in the press conference today. So let's take this little break.
As long as the quest for wealth and power still live in the hearts of man, brother, you all will go on. It cannot be won. No, 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 the war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. Peace in the world. The war will go on. We need a spiritual revolution. The war will go on. Lord, put a hand, save the children. The war will go on. Man fighting against man. The war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. It cannot be won.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Now, as I said, and I'm going to give you all a lot of opportunity to call in and ask and give your views on the public health side of it and your views on the fiscal side of it. And I invite particularly people, well, everybody stands to lose here. The frontline people in the tourism industry, for sure, and everybody really. What the measures, what you understand the measures to mean, and if you think something can be improved upon it, because it's not too late. I don't believe that if you come up with something that makes sense, that the government will simply ignore it. There's an attitude of distrust and suspicion. Certainly in the mind of the Prime Minister, it would appear, for information and recommendations coming from outside his circle. But I've seen some recommendations in here by the government that I have been putting to you. And while I won't say they came from me, because other minds could have made the same observations, you have a chance, if you see something that's faulty, something that needs to be tweaked, by all means, share the platform to help improve the package of incentives. Now, before I go on to that though, well, I told you about the people not keeping the quarantine pact, they're not keeping the quarantine obligations. And I know that there are situations, in which that is being breached. And we want to speak to those families and tell them, love your loved one, but she needs to be quarantined, and she needs to be quarantined. She must stay in her room. And you have to disinfect and that sort of thing. Not that she has the virus. Because quarantine does not mean you have been tested and tested positive. Quarantine, you've come from a hot spot or whatever, and I want you to be in quarantine for a period of time, just to make sure. Then if symptoms appear, then they'll go through the procedure of testing you. In the meantime, just in case, God forbid, you have the virus, they don't want you to give anybody the virus. That's it. So now we come to today's press conference. One of the things I must comment, you might call me persnickety, but I must comment on it. It's kind of like an obsession with me. I don't like lateness. The Prime Minister, they had announced that the presentation, the address on TV the other night would be 8 o'clock. Then they said 9 o'clock. And I think he started after 9. Today, the press conference was to start at 3. It started at about 28 minutes to 4, 3:30. The former Prime Minister was a notorious late arrival. The present Prime Minister seems to be the same. If you want to have a press conference for 3 o'clock, don't say 3 o'clock if you know you can't be ready for 3. Say 4. Don't keep people waiting. It's disrespectful. And when a man is sitting waiting for you, when a nation is sitting waiting for you, we're waiting to die. We ain't doing nothing. We're just waiting. Come on, Mr. Prime Minister. Don't keep us waiting. Some of us are very old. We don't have a waiting time left. Running out of waiting time fast. Now, so let me get to some of the measures that the Prime Minister enunciated today with regard to the situation. He said that the stimulus package is far-reaching. He said St. Kitts Nevis has a strong future ahead. Of course, he had a little politics in the front and at the back. Team Unity has kept its promises over the past 5 years, achieved surpluses while paying off the debt to the IMF, and more wise financial planning put St. Kitts Nevis in a better position, using its own resources in the first instance. That's what they would have been told anyway. If they'd gone to any outside agency, use up yours first. That's how the game is played. Government had resources to strengthen health services. He says that the government had resources to strengthen health services. We haven't seen a great strengthening of health services over the last 5 years in the country. Indeed, one might suggest that the arrow has pointed in the opposite direction. And again, I'm not here to slam anybody. I'm just here to discuss a matter that is important. It's a life and death matter. And we have to deal with truth and not cloud over these things by political and personal affiliations. God, that will get us nowhere in the end. We'll be following the Pied Piper over the cliff, whoever the Pied Piper is. He thanked health and security workers. He said still no confirmed cases of COVID-19. He says that we are at the head of the line. I'm paraphrasing him. And everybody wants to see what the St. Kitts Nevis model is and to adopt it. Well, there's a federal model and Nevis has a model. And some people in the know believe that the Nevis model might be a more efficiently structured model. I don't know the details of it comparatively or individually to give an opinion on it. And I certainly don't have the expertise. But some people in that field of public health and that sort of thing seem to feel that Nevis has a better plan. I don't know. But it, of course, dovetails into the federal plan. They help each other. Hold on, this thing is disappearing off my phone. Oh boy, these modern phones, eh? Just bear with me for a second, please. Okay. Now, if he says that we are ahead of the game, what did PAHO say when they did their assessment on St. Kitts a week and a half ago? What did PAHO say? Because I think in the interest of disclosure, the country should know what PAHO said. We've seen in recent times a bit of a hesitancy to release information. We would like to know what the PAHO report says. He says we are the model. But he also says that we are doing things, getting this ready. We only got the regulations ready a week or two ago to do with the fines for people who offended the quarantine regulations. We are sealing off the borders. We're doing that now. We're going to have virtual town halls now, no longer the physical ones, when they were being urged for weeks to stop these town halls. But they continued along their way. So I don't know how they could be really telling people that their model, the model they put in place, has been the envy of everybody, because that is not the case from the information that we have. Some countries, Grenada came out with a fiscal plan a couple of weeks ago. Maybe Grenada can't afford as much money as we can, but they came out with what they had, and it is the best they had. And they came out with it 2-3 weeks ago. We are the last out of the gates with that, as far as I am aware. Now, here are some of the things they're going to do. March the 25th, that's tomorrow at midnight, the borders will be closed off for a week. Well, until April the 7th. Flights and medical emergencies will be exempted. Cargo flights and medical emergencies will be exempted. International import will also be allowed. Immigration, customs, police, and so will enforce border controls. He said vessels will be allowed in too, But a question I have, when the planes, the cargo planes and the cargo ships come with materials for us, you have people working on these ships. What protocols will be observed to ensure that our people don't pick up anything from any one of those people working on the planes or the ships? And we'd like to know what measures are planned or in place to deal with those situations. Let me go to the next one. This phone is giving me trouble. So flights and medical emergencies will be exempted and so forth. Okay. Recruitment at frontline personnel is being pursued. They said they were ready, but they're pursuing personnel. Citizens and residents who cannot arrive by the deadline must stay where they are for now. Recruiting health professionals from Cuba, from overseas. Now they said Cuba today, which is a good thing. Some will arrive shortly, I'm told, on Saturday. Government consulted with critical stakeholders to prepare package. Who are those critical stakeholders? And again, why didn't they consult the opposition? Why? He says government feels the pain of everybody. Okay. The stimulus package amounts to nearly 120 million. You have to apply for the package. And I want you all to listen carefully, because I want you to weigh in on the package, how it will impact you, how you've been impacted, and it's not going to get any better for the next couple of months unless God works a miracle. Here's some of the measures they will propose for you. Postponement of property tax from June to September. So instead of having to pay it in June, you pay it in September. Removal of VAT and import duty on select items like hand sanitizers, dispensing machines, wipes, alcohol, gloves, masks, etc. Removal of VAT for those things. Well, many or most of those things might already fall under the exemption for medical supplies. So one does not know how much value that is to the consumer. And secondly, if you remove the VAT and import duty from it, seeing that these are critically essential items, are you going to put price control on it and protect the consumers from being gouged by suppliers? Removal of import duty and custom service charge on select food items for 6 months. Again, it sounds good. But are you going to put price control restrictions on the suppliers? We've seen that anytime you raise salaries here, minimum wage, businesses either reduce the hours of workers or jack up prices. Who is going to control them? He says they will provide a waiver of payment of water consumption from April to June. But only persons who are laid off or have reduced income will be eligible to that, paying for water. He says they will reduce the company tax between April and June for businesses who keep 75% of their employees. And reduce the unincorporated business tax from 4% to 2% for the period April to June. So they're going to reduce the business tax. They're saying that now. I happen to know that weeks ago, the Chamber of Industry and Commerce met with the government, met with at least one government ministry, asking them, urging them to put measures in place to mitigate the losses and to help to stabilize the economy. And in face of what was to come weeks ago, the government had nothing to offer weeks ago. And the economic mitigation and fiscal mitigation aspect of it is critically important as well. It's all well and good to prevent the virus and to manage it in cases where it comes and stuff, and all the protocols and the quarantine and isolation and the intensive care and so forth. But the economics and the social aspects of it are also important. If they had these measures in place 2 to 3 weeks ago, I have a list of companies here and businesses that are closing or sending people layoff or putting them on severance. And you're looking here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 businesses. Over 700 people. If this measure had been told to the businesses 2 to 3 weeks ago, some of these people might not be losing their jobs today. So it is not correct to say that you are first in the line or you're ahead of the game, or that the model that you are presenting is a model that everybody wants to copy, because you're behind in a number of ways. And Dr. Wilkinson said something today in terms of being ahead of the game. He said, we have had no positive tests yet, but we're getting 31 technical people from Cuba on Saturday or in a couple of days. Well, 39 people have been tested. Of those 39, 19 results have come in. And all of those results have thankfully been negative. We don't know about the results for the other 20. The Cubans should have been called long ago. And this is not an affront to Dr. Wilkinson. He's a professional. I respect him. He has taken care of me. Nothing personal, nothing, but I disagree, sir. Not because we haven't had a confirmed case means that we are ahead of anything by having the Cubans come in on Saturday. And if the Cubans come in on Saturday, where will they use as a special unit? He says the private ward at the JN France. I think there's 17 rooms there or something like that. But if you use the private ward at the JN France Hospital for a COVID-19 intensive care unit, you can't keep, at least I don't think, you can't keep the pediatric ward just facing it. So where the baby's gonna go? I'm not a medical person. I'm not a public health person. I'm just trying to figure out if those two wards can stand face to face. 20 results still to come. And of the 292 people quarantined, and based on our information, these quarantines are not at all airtight. At least many of them, if not most of them, are not airtight and being strictly observed, both by the quarantined individual and his or her family who share the home space with him or her. So we have concerns, and they're genuine. So we're going to reduce the corporate income tax from 33% to 25% for any company that retains 75% of their employees. As I said, that horse has bolted. Because people now have gone off work. I don't know if the companies will reconsider and maybe bring them back and be up to 75% employment level so they could get the reduction in corporate tax. That's something I would encourage them to consider. Likewise, for those who are not corporations, who could get some relief, only temporary, but relief nevertheless, and reviewable on the unincorporated business tax. Another provision is waiver of payment for water consumption for farmers from April to September. Water free of charge from April to September. I don't know if there is enough water lines. There are enough water lines on the farmlands to get the farmers hooked up to water fast. Because if that's not the case, then it will take them a month or two maybe to get the water lines in. Then the government will have to extend. And when you hear people, farmers, for years, talking about solidify, fortify the infrastructure in the farming sector, nobody listening. Nobody listening. The present Prime Minister used to be Minister of Agriculture in his first term in government with Labour. And he didn't seem to be too enthusiastic about food production in St. Kitts. He said, we are too small. We don't have enough land. That's when we were trying to start a program called the Agritour program to grow food to sell to the cruise ships and to sell to neighboring islands. That's 25 years ago. And now we need the farmers and the local food more than ever. So they'll get water for free from June to September. Provision from April to September, forgive me. Another provision is additional $5 million support to the poverty alleviation program in the first instance. Our people in the tourist industry and elsewhere who can show that they've had a loss of income can go and apply to be put on the PAP. And also they'll get $15 million allocated by Social Security, and Social Security can top it up for it to get to 1,000. So some people will be able to get to 1,000. The Prime Minister said you have 4,000 people on PAP, and they get $500 a month. So the PAP is using up $2 million a month. And now with this extra thing, it's more top up. But the question is, there are so many people who need the help. Who will determine who gets and who doesn't get? And what are those people out there in the field thinking now as you listen to me? What measures would you like to see in place that you did not hear mentioned today by the Prime Minister and his people in his press conference? Another one, employees who contract the virus will receive Social Security benefits. The special fund of approximately 15 million. Okay, so I pointed to that. But you get like sickness benefit, and Social Security will contribute to that once you get the sickness benefit. Another one is provision of additional resources, $12 million for the severance payment fund. So if people get laid off, they get severance pay. Then the Development Bank will give a moratorium for 6 months on mortgage payments and interest, as will the National Housing Corporation, NHC, which will do for 3 months in the first instance. They said they'll put more funds through the Fresh Start program. They'll be funding the Development Bank for citizens, first tranche already on the Fresh Start program. Government will prioritize approved capital projects that will impact the economy, public sector projects, big projects that you could see and bedazzle you and induce you and entice you, and inject $191 million in those projects. The question is what those projects will be. The Prime Minister said we will know. And will they be contracted strictly according to the Procurements and Contracts Administration Act and other good governance practices on behalf of the people of the country? And he mentioned at the end that for the next 60 days, the cable will increase speed of entry-level broadband package for education and learning, reduce the price of flash and bolt packages, reopen free with hotspots for Wi-Fi, waive all late fees, and waive installation fees. And apparently, the cable is contemplating further packages. As I said, I gave the information on the quarantine, and I think I gave you all of the other information. Now, so here we have it. We've dealt with the public health side of it. I've given you some things to think about. And the address by the Prime Minister on Sunday night. We've dealt with the economic, fiscal, job mitigation proposals by the government. I've given you all of them, and now you have a chance to reflect on what I've shared with you, and for you to now respond and say, well, this is a good measure, that maybe is not so good, maybe this could have been considered, and so forth. I have been consulting, for example, and we're going to take a break in 30 seconds. I have been consulting people who are in the business. Somebody in finance. And he says to me, I do not think the leadership understands the extent of the economic impact. I'm also worried about the bank. They have hundreds of millions of dollars in the US stock market and hundreds of millions in underperforming loans. That is from a finance guru. I have from a tourism guru. That person would have used the $12 million to inject into the tourism plant instead of to severance pay. They would have subsidized tourism businesses during the next 3 months, ensuring that workers receive pay and keep the tourism product intact for when the industry returns. $12 million is not enough. Political mileage does not feed the children whose parents wait for tourists to buy their craft, take their tours, or even sample their food. That's from a tourism professional. Another financial wizard, and these are people who are not intoxicated by politics and political partisanship. If anything, I would regard them as quiet supporters of the present government. Let me read this one. The stimulus package did not appeal to me. Absent was direct help for the hotel workers and taxi operators, to name a few. It was disappointing and fraught with possible trickery. He said the $10 million for inducing more farming should be $20 million. And the government must say what it is for. Equipment, seeds, irrigation, and so forth. How much more land will be made available and on what terms. So this is some of the feedback that I've been getting. And now we'll take a break and receive your feedback.
As long as the quest for wealth and power still live in the hearts of man, brother, you all will go on. It cannot be won. No, 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 the war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. Peace in the world. The war will go on. We need a spiritual revolution. The war will go on. Lord, put a hand, save the children. The war will go on. Man fighting against man. The war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. It cannot be won.
Welcome back. So we are in the operating room. We're discussing COVID-19, the dreaded coronavirus. We've discussed the address on television and radio by the Prime Minister on Sunday night, and we went through some of the things he said, the highlights. We've discussed today's press conference and went through the highlights. We've expressed our opinion on some of the things that were said. We've expressed some concerns at some of the things that have been happening. And we think that the government has not been as quick and deliberate as it could have been in putting the pieces together to build a firewall against this rapacious invader called COVID-19. Not to ridicule, not to belittle, not to besmirch, anything like that, but to observe and to comment. And to question anything that comes from anywhere, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or the Observer newspaper or the Wall Street Journal or government information services or anybody. You must always examine the information. And this is why we say in the operating room all the time, think for yourselves, but think of others. And I can't tell the Prime Minister what to say and how to say it. But it would please my and many other hearts, no end, if on occasions like this, he would demonstrate greater statesmanship rather than seeming always to revert almost unavoidably, helplessly, to raw politicking. Leave that to Trump. Clearly, our Prime Minister is a man of great intellect and potential. And he can do better than all this raw politicking. That's my opinion. Now, you tell me, you have 292 people in quarantine. How many people you think you need to manage them on a daily basis? 288 in St. Kitts and 288 at home, and 4 at a government facility. How many people you think you need to monitor them? In some countries, they use some kind of electronic device, either on the phone or some anklet thing to trace them. But it has to be very fine-tuned because they really should stay in their room. And if you get food, you have to get food. But the food is put to the door and then they come and open the door and eat. And preferably put in disposable containers because you have to observe very tight hygiene and sanitation practices in the home. Wiping off and so, even though the person hasn't shown any signs, hasn't shown any symptoms. Because if they do, then they go through the procedures to get tested. And if they test positive, then they go into isolation directly under the hands of a doctor or a team of doctors and respiratory specialists and nurses and ICU people and that sort of thing. If it gets serious, but I don't see that the infrastructure is there, the human resource infrastructure is there to effectively monitor 292. So 207 people in quarantine in St. Kitts. And I told you about the gentleman who came in from a neighboring island, from Jamaica to be specific, last week Friday, was put in quarantine in a house that had been uninhabited for years. And living in the house with him were a swarm of cockroaches and an ample number of rats. And he had to wait almost 24 hours to get his first meal from them. We have to do better. They said 39 have been tested. We have 19 results, all negative. That's great. We hope the other 20 are also negative. But we can't claim to be ahead of the game or in front if we don't know what those results are. And if only now we're getting people from Cuba. And only now we're determining which place we're going to put this unit. And again, I'm not a medical man. I'm not a public health man. And I bow to the knowledge of the professionals. But I would wonder about the prudence of setting up a COVID ward right opposite a children's ward. Children who just born. That's what it's for, mostly. Well, and kids who get sick. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about it. Now, there's another aspect to this, And I don't know if the people of this country understand how deep this thing can go, The tourism industry is basically shut down. The people in the tourism industry buy goods and services across the economy. They put money in banks. From their business, they buy goods and services, and the transactions that take place generate revenue for the government. That extra revenue for the government will be used to pay the cost of running the government and pay for projects and that sort of thing. The revenue for the businesses will allow businesses to grow and allow them to employ people. The jobs will send money into Social Security. And so you have all of this interplay of economic activity and social development based on the industries that you have that anchor your economy. The anchor has broken. Of course, it can be reconnected. The question is how and when, and how far will the ship have drifted in the meanwhile. And in the meanwhile, how much suffering and loss will the people who rent cars, the people who do safaris, the people who do mountain tours, the people who do diving, the vendors, the craft vendors, the hair braiders. Because they not only want the money, they need the money, but they want to be occupied. They're going to want to be occupied. Some of them are going to need some kind of occupational therapy in a safe setting, with social distancing being the essential ingredient in that whole process. It is good to get a 3 months break in the first instance from the bank on principal and interest. But they're going to still have to pay that money at the back end of it whenever it comes. And anxiety will mount. And this is one of the reasons that I've been proposing regularly on this program to fast track some agricultural development. In fact, I've been preaching agricultural development since 1993 on the Labour Party platform. And now is as good a time as any to get into it in a more serious manner. All those pretty looking fruits and vegetables you see in the supermarkets, of course some can be grown here because of the climate, but a lot of them, all of them that are imported, are putting money in the hands of farmers overseas who grow food on soil that is nowhere near as fertile as ours. And it is as if we put a curse on ourselves that we're not going back to the land. And we're not going to farm professionally and in a modern, successful way. The land is where the food and the sustenance comes from. The land is where we come from. And I would have liked to see more impetus given by the government to really developing, expanding, and fast tracking, in the first instance, food production in the country, especially vegetables and fruits. Because I think we are headed to the point, maybe not in my lifetime, but I think we are headed to the point where more people will be vegetarians than not. Wholesome, organic food. Peas and beans, okra, eggplant, Christophine, and your bushes. And of course, your marijuana. But right now, food. I don't feel that enough emphasis is being placed there. What, they're going to put $10 million? And what the $10 million is for? As one of the financial gurus who I consulted told me, what is that for? One doesn't know. Let me look at some of these other things here. Just bear with me for a second. They also announced today at the press conference that the cabinet had taken a decision last week, to increase the salary of nurses, ambulance workers, and so forth. That's a good thing. Long overdue. Long overdue. And the Prime Minister did say today, is it because of the virus? Let me be cynical for a moment. Is it because the virus provides an opportunity to do it, but it also will maybe have some political mileage in it for the election? He said he was going to give them a top-up. All the frontline workers, the security workers, the health workers, and so forth. What about the teachers who are going to have to be dealing with the children? I don't know. Let's take this call. Hi, good evening. You're on the radio, please.
Good night, Mr. Astafan.
Good night.
Yes, I see you're a poet laureate now. Great stuff.
You're laughing at me, man.
Listening to you tonight, though, underscores exactly why all citizens need to be vigilant and thinking, and not just succumb to the narrative that once the government says so, it's so. You know, we know everything is dynamic and fast-moving, but why does it take you to disclose that 311 is not working? that shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, the government is too inclined to, I think, to think optics and do not have a good record on accountability and transparency. So, yes, some can trust, but I hope most will do like you and verify. And another thing, you highlighted the preparedness thing. As mundane as it might seem to some people, the lateness does not inspire confidence that you are prepared and you have your ducks all lined up. Okay, so it was important to mention that.
Yes.
And I got the distinct impression that the government was procrastinated too much on things that they now choose to do. Okay, like for instance the border, what to do with our borders, and you know the fact that the Cubans are now coming to assist. Okay, I mean these things should have been done long before, because when you look at our neighbors, we see that they got the contracted cases from people coming in, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we were just lucky that none of those that came in, well, so far as we know, anyway, had it. So, you know, it just underscores, it vindicates your whole program, as a matter of fact, and what you're doing. Okay, we have to keep, you know, focus, keep things, keep the government accountable, right, and be vigilant.
And you see, caller,
After that.
as you said that, let me engage you for a minute. The government is not particularly robust when it comes to disseminating information. The last time that details were given to the public with regard to quarantine and that sort of thing was, I think, on the 2nd of March.
Second.
2nd of March, which is 22 days ago.
Yeah.
You would think that in the midst of a crisis like this, real crisis and a potential to be extremely bad, God forbid, you would get regular briefings,
Yes.
which happens in the other territories. You'll get regular briefings, and you'll see the face of the Prime Minister in those briefings and hear his voice, but he needs to be brief because he likes to be very prolix. The longer the answer, the less questions can be asked.
Yeah. But actually, I think because of what the details that he did not give on Sunday, right, and the pressure, I think a lot of people were disappointed, right? He had to come good this time or go home.
Well, the
right?
question is...
So even the statistics that were given, I mean, why these couldn't have been given before? You know, let people know, right? That in a crisis, you need the truth.
Well,
right?
suppose one of the journalists had not asked for the data. It might not have been given. You should not have to ask for the data. The public has a right to know the data.
Yeah.
A right. And if you don't recognize...
What has it done? It at least give people, tell people that something is going on. Because before this, we were wondering, well, exactly how much testing is being done when we say we have no confirmed cases. Give the people the information. Once people get it, at least, they don't have to speculate and they won't have the fake news and so on going on out there. I don't know why they keep things like these to the chest.
And
it is what it is.
The unit they're calling the Health Emergency Operations Center, maybe that should be the focal point for disseminating information rather than SKNIS or ZIZ.
A kind of NEMA kind of thing.
Because I seem to recall for the address the other night on TV, it didn't come from the SKNIS. I believe it came from a private media entity.
Oh? I
think it was outsourced. If I recall correctly, I could be wrong on that. But the Emergency Health Center the Health Emergency Operations Center, I don't know if that has been activated yet. I didn't hear anybody saying so. They mentioned it, but I don't know if it's been activated, and it ought to be the center for the dissemination of public information.
You got to trust in something like this, right? You got to trust people's judgment. You have to trust the citizens, and they got to trust you too, right? So don't hide information from them. When you hide things, people wonder what you're hiding.
Exactly.
Why you're hiding it.
That breeds suspicion.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
All right.
Thank you. And also, our information is that the technical people have been trying to push to get these things in place. Push assiduously, untiringly to get these things in place. And were even considered to be a little bit pushy, maybe even paranoid over this COVID thing. Man, all you take it easy, man. This is not, And I'm tired of hearing people saying how blessed St. Kitts and Nevis is. We're not any more blessed than anybody else. Hurricanes hit us just like anybody else. Viruses hit us just like anybody else. All of us are blessed. God does not favor you over anybody. Stop it. Stop it. Because one day you might force him to send you a message telling you he doesn't favor you over anybody else, over Antigua or Dominica or Grenada or wherever else. Stop it. So where are we today? We still have a few minutes if anybody wants to call in. Where are we today? We don't believe the government is sharing information readily and quickly enough. We would like to know what is in that PAHO assessment because, let's take this call. Hello? We don't have much time left, so you're going to have to hurry, please.
Yeah, no problem. Good evening, Mr. Stefan.
Yes, sir.
I was rather taken aback today when I heard the CMO said that we have 200 and something people in quarantine. I've been listening for the past couple of weeks, and up until then, we didn't get any update on this thing. When these guys going to stop hiding from us, Mr. Astafan?
Well,
This public should have this information a long time ago. But you see, this is the problem. And then when they get upset when people are speculating. We know more other information we don't know about. You guys have a lovely night.
yeah, thanks a lot, man. You're quite correct. 292 persons in quarantine. That's a lot of persons. A lot of persons. 207 in St. Kitts. And even reports on the quarantines, if people are breaking the quarantine, then punish them. You have to send a strong message. One of the things that caused China to flatten the bubble was strong and consistent discipline. Strong and consistent discipline. South Korea did the same thing. And now America regrets that it did not do the same thing because they're talking about cultural differences. When people are dying, you got to fix this thing. Make the sacrifice. Close down the place. 3 months of sacrifice is an easier pill to swallow than 100 people in St. Kitts dying from this thing. 3 months of sacrifice. We can shake off the dust, get up, stretch, and get back to work. In the name of God or Jah or whoever. But if you're dead, you can't come back. I don't know what's so hard about that to understand. And let me, as I started, I'll finish. I want to finish with the poem. A poem that I wrote today, very quickly, about the coronavirus and what we should do. Okay. Here's the poem. We wait as with a hurricane for it to come and slam us. Anxiety and stress possess our brain, this dreaded coronavirus. It's on a global killing spree, and when the final count is in, will it include you or me, the deadly COVID-19? Asthma and age and other things challenge some of us to survive. But there are things we can be doing to help keep us alive. Show love and care 6 feet away until July, even September. Practice health and hygiene every day to avoid going 6 feet under. Naked capitalism, singular or state, feed off violence and greed. A caste of oligarchs and paupers. The garks get richer, the paupers need. The status quo maintained by guns and biowarfare. The masses divided and maimed. Catastrophe everywhere. COVID exposes how fragile, though, are all nations, big and small. How corporate might and paupers too. In the end, we are beggars all. Meanwhile, as COVID kills us men, she's cleaning air and sea. A mandate clear, not if but when, for earthly harmony. Keep your distance. Stay 6 feet away. Don't go to a crowded place. Go to the beach. Take your single walks. Enjoy Mother Nature. Cool out for 3 months. Avoid the crowds. Eat healthy. Eat ital food. Eat vegetables. Drink your coconut water. Take your steamed fish. Eat healthy. Keep your distance. And love each other from the distance. It's going to make the love stronger when you get back together. Thank you. Good night and God bless.